Welcome to Right Now with Scrivener, where writers talk about how they work, how they develop their ideas, and how they use Scrivener, the app built for long-form writing projects. I'm your host, Kirk McElhearn, author of Take Control of Scrivener. Today I'm very happy to welcome Isabella Valeri. She is the author of her first novel, Letters from the Dead. On her website, she points out that she is an avid markswoman, skier, and equestrian. She has flown over 1,500 hours as pilot in command of various single and twin-engined aircraft. Isabella, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
When I started reading the novel, you mentioned the year when this takes place in the very first sentence, and if you hadn't done that, I would have thought it had been written in the 20s or the 30s, that entre-deux-guerres period where it takes place in this estate someplace in the Alps, and you get this feeling almost Magic Mountain, even though it's not a sanatorium. And there's this, I want to say, this Gothic atmosphere. There's this unnamed protagonist who's 11 years old. And the first thing I was thinking is how much of this is true? Oh, it can't be true. But actually, you're saying some of it is based on your life.
Well, the book is a work of fiction, and the stories in it are mostly true and substantially accurate. It's interesting you talk about the Gothic aspects of the story. Donna Tartt's Secret History, which is a huge inspiration of mine, is quite the same. And when you read that book, you ask yourself, when does that novel take place? And at first, it doesn't sound like it is a modern book. And it is quite Gothic, isn't it?
As I was reading more, the unnamed protagonist is going around through this estate, and it kind of feels at times another literary reference like The Castle in Gormenghast, where the main character keeps finding these new rooms and floors and underground things and all. It sounds very James Bondish in a way.
Yeah, that's funny. Some of my my friends in real life call me a retired Bond girl, but it's quite an exaggeration. I'm certainly not jumping out of planes and things of that nature, at least not anymore.
No, it's more that it sounds like that this is the place that the evil genius is hiding up in the mountains.
Well, it is a very anachronistic setting. Of course, it's isolated, and it's strange. When I wrote this book, I wanted the estate to feel like a character of its own, and the dynasty is certainly a character. It has its own wants and needs and desires. And it's a powerful entity, in a way, that affects our anti-heroine throughout the book series.
Yes, this is a series. Apparently, you've got 4 books planned?
Yes. The first 2 books are purchased already. I've got a deal with Artria, Emily Bessler Books, and but there are 2 more books in this series, and then I've got I have some other series as well. I can't help but write, and so if I'm not working on this particular series, I'm usually working on either some video casts or podcasts, audio things that I'm doing on the website, or I'm working on one of the other series.
I wanted to mention that about your website, which has all these audio-visual things. You've got lectures, you've got some of them have images from films and you're talking over them. Are you more of a visual person than a verbal person, or are both important to you?
That's a really good question. I would say I'm both. I'm very into films. I rewatch some classics probably once a year, including Alien is one of my favorites. I watch that once a year. Kingdom of Heaven, Godfather, and it's fascinating to watch these classic films from the point of view of narrative theory, observation.
Yeah.
And I think some of these classic films, they are perfect examples of. So I always think about the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, and these films don't fall into that classification.
Yeah, a lot of them break the rules that people have tried to establish.
Right. I think the hero's journey is actually a bit boring, and it's quite predictable. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't love Kingdom of Heaven or Star Wars Episode 4. For me, when I'm writing, I like to write anti-heroines. So I have basically, I've made my own journey, anti-heroine's journey, you could call it, I guess. Because there's something that really struck me from Gillian Flynn.
Gillian Flynn.
Thank you. She wrote Gone Girl and Dark Places, but she writes fascinating anti-heroines, and they're all damaged, and they all kind of win in the end, but not without great cost. And I think that makes the anti-heroine so much more interesting, and it's also more realistic. The hero's journey, okay, we've got, say, a female protagonist. She struggles against her romantic rivals for the first 2/3 of the book. And then the middle of Act 3, she finds the man of her dream and marries him, and he inherits a vineyard in France, and they live happily ever after. And that's so boring. And plus, people don't understand how much work goes into running a vineyard.
I want to say something about your writing that really struck me. And it's kind of weird because I'm just looking at your photo on Zoom, so I can't really see you and get that connection. But you seem to be a Renaissance woman in the sense that you know a lot about a lot of things, or a lot of references to history and science and different things in the book. Are you one of these people who just reads everything and learns everything?
Yes, I suppose I am. I had access to an incredible library when I was a girl, and I think the most modern book in there was probably from 1965. They had books hundreds of years old, and I was allowed to run around, and I could pick up anything that I wanted, take it from the shelf, and put it on a book stand and read it. I'll tell you a funny story. When I was growing up, my brothers had a different education than I had. So they got to learn the cool stuff, the fun things, and I was learning etiquette, which is incredibly boring. So my brothers got to learn languages, including Latin, and the best I could do was to steal my brother's Latin books when he wasn't looking and try to understand them. So I found this one book. It's Caesar's Gallic War, and it's the Edwards translation, which has English on one side and Latin on the other side. So if one is trying to figure out Latin, this is a great book to do it. And if one is interested in war tactics, of course, it's also fascinating. So I found this book. So I put it on the book stand, and the curator finds me reading this book, and he calls my grandfather in. My grandfather walks in and sees what I'm reading and walks away. Shortly after that, we had a new tutor, and before this, they had all been incredibly boring and rote memorization, things that were of little interest to me. And my lessons changed. I think my grandfather thought that I was interested in war tactics and Caesar. And so suddenly, with this new tutor, he was teaching me Clausewitz and all about the East India Company and fascinating topics.
When you were just interested in the Latin.
I was just trying to show up my brothers. So I wasn't raised on modern works. I hadn't seen girls the teen magazines or any of those things until much later in my life. So I suppose that really had quite an effect on me. It was a wonderful result, actually. I was quite happy to learn all of these far more fascinating subjects. Napoleon is one of my favorites. I love him. I love his entire story. There's an especially touching painting of Napoleon, which was, it depicts after the 100 days. And the artist's name is Sir William Quiller. It hangs in the Tate, I believe. And it depicts Napoleon on a ship in the background, he's watching the receding shoreline of the French coast. And as it descends into the ocean for the last time, this is his final time. And behind him are British officers, and they're all standing in a group separated from him and looking at him. The story is that Napoleon was so charismatic that it didn't matter what side you were on. Any officer at all would be captivated by him just by being in his mere proximity. And so the senior officers would have to watch their men and keep them from talking to him even. And if they caught them, they would physically push them away. And what kind of man was that? That he was so charismatic that he could charm the opposing side, the people that they might have killed. I love that story. I love Napoleon's story. And the painting just always stays with me. Napoleon is he's the anti-Joseph Campbell, isn't he? He tries so hard.
And he failed, and he came back, and that's part of the allure of Napoleon, isn't it?
It's one of my fascinations with great men and great women in history.
Okay, let's take a break, and we're going to come back and talk more about your book and how you use Scrivener. Writing a book, screenplay, or even a long article is a juggling act. You need to find the right words and the right structure, keep track of research, and refer to notes. Tailor-made for long writing projects, Scrivener is the go-to app for writers of all types. Scrivener combines a typewriter, binder, and corkboard in a single app. A project outline makes it easy to get an overview of your work and flip between sections. Refer to research alongside your writing, and just drag and drop to rearrange your work. Write in any order in sections as large or small as you like, and let Scrivener stitch it all together when you're ready to share your words with the world. With Scrivener, you'll find everything you need to start writing and keep writing. Scrivener is available for Mac, Windows, iPad, and iPhone. Download the free trial Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about your book, The Letters from the Dead. Right now, with Scrivener listeners can get a 20% discount First of all, with the what
Oh,
coupon genre code podcast.
do
you think it is?
That's
and what would be your
scrivenerApp.com.
elevator pitch describing what happens in the novel?
I'm not quite sure how to answer that question, but I will try. I think there are aspects of many genres. I think it's gothic, there's dark academia, thriller, it's family drama, historical fiction, fictional memoir, even, and of course literary fiction. I think that most authors would say this. I write the books that I wanted to read, and so I because of the way that I grew up, I had a sort of a built-in bias towards deeply textured, rich, almost lyrical and archaic prose, even as a young girl, and so I think my writing tends to reflect that. I also think that, and I hope that the longer novel, which suffered badly in the quick dopamine hit world of Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, I hope it's making a comeback.
Well, it actually is, and I don't spend a lot of time on TikTok, but a lot of people have been championing things like Dostoevsky and Clarissa, a 1,200-page epistolary novel, The Count of Monte Cristo, the kind of thing, more than 1,000 pages, all of those novels. So I think that there is a minority of readers who want to improve their attention span, if that's the right way to say it, who are willing to invest that much time, who are willing to invest as much time in a novel as they would in a video game in certain ways.
Yes, well, Letters from the Dead is just under 170,000 words.
It's long, yeah.
It's very long.
It's longer than I expected. You sent me a file that I was looking at in my Kindle, and I think the Kindle says it's 600 pages. But I like reading long novels because I've always read relatively quickly, not speed reading, but I can read pretty quickly. So I can read a 200-page novel in an evening, and I like books that stay with me for a week or more. I read a lot. I don't watch a lot of TV, so I can sit down with a novel like this and enjoy it. It's like a long meal. It's like a vacation for a week, right? When you're reading something this long.
Oh, yes. I've always thought it a bit unfair that fantasy books are allowed to be, and in fact they're almost expected to be very long, and then fiction, other types of fiction is expected to be shorter. I want to dig in. I want the world building. Why is the world of Thomas Cromwell no less interesting than a fantasy world? I think it's just as foreign to us today as the world of Morgane is. Her last name is Cherry, the author of that book, which I love. I love that series.
There is actually a term for that book. It's the BCF, the big commercial fantasy. And it's a thing. And now all fantasy novels have to be trilogies because one's not enough and you want the readers to commit. And it's true that in quote unquote literary fiction, it's less popular. So how did you, what did you say, 150,000, 170,000?
It was just below 170,000. And that was after a lot of cutting.
I was going to ask you that. How long was it and what was the editorial process like? Because it's hard to sell a novel like that these days, if only because the cost of printing it.
Yes, I'm quite fortunate that Emily Bessler and CAA were willing to take a chance on me as a first-time author, because yes, it isn't so common to get a debut novel that's this long. The editing process was quite brutal. I actually it was painful. Because there were, I even cut some characters that I had come to really care for in the first book, and entire scenes. I think I cut 1 or 2 chapters at one point. I just had to completely remove everything. What was nice about that, though, is that I don't delete anything that I cut. I have a deleted scenes, deleted chapters file in Scrivener that I use, and I call it the whole of orphaned scenes and characters. It's a bit dramatic, but that's my folder name.
And so you can bring these back in the future, especially since this is a series.
Yes, and you never know how a scene might be able to be used in a later book. Or another thing I can do is through my my website is I'm able to take some of the stories that I deleted. I can go back if I think I'm in the mood to create some content on my website. I look in these deleted in my orphaned scenes and characters, and I can go in there and get an idea for a little podcast that I do. And so I have 2 stories, I think, on my website at the moment. It's only 2 that were based on deleted scenes. That's fantastic.
Okay, let's talk about how you use Scrivener. Before we started recording, you said your oldest Scrivener file dates from 2014. So you've been using Scrivener for a long time.
Yes. I never planned to write. Well, let me go back. Okay. There were 3 things that transformed my writing completely. It was discovering the Snowflake method, visiting Shepperton Studios as a guest of David Leitch and Kelly McCormick, and seeing the war room there. And the third thing was discovering Scrivener. Before that, I was a pantser. So writing with no organization, no plan of where anything was going, I would just write and write and write. When I first even considered writing a book, I had an enormous amount of material all over the place. I also have handwritten notes and notebooks and Post-its and things like that all over the place, completely disorganized. And of course, to change anything, it's like changing the direction of a giant container ship. You have to make small corrections everywhere. It takes a long time. It's a lot of work. It's tedious. And so I was having to do that anytime I wanted to make any sort of major change. That's a lot of work. Then I discovered Scrivener, and I started using the preset organization that they had and making it my own. And it was like a completely different way to write. My first book has taken me 15 years from when I first started working on it to selling it and to publication. Book two has taken much less time, and I almost accidentally wrote the first book to the next series already. And I was participating in NaNoWriMo, and of course you have to write minimum 50,000 words in a month. And so what I decided to do, because I needed to do it anyway, in book 3 of the Letters from the Dead series is a character who becomes quite influential on our anti-heroine's life. And she was fascinating to me, and she's based on a real person. And I was just trying to get to know her better. In real life, I don't actually know the real story of her past, but I needed to understand her so I could write her better. So I was participating in NaNoWriMo, and I ended up focusing on her backstory. And I don't want to spoil it too much, but this was the first time I'd used Scrivener to write a book. It started with just writing her history that I was coming up with, and I used Snowflake, which Scrivener is perfectly set up to use the Snowflake method. And so I did that. I ended up writing this book in 100 days.
How long was it?
It's about 120, 140. I think it's around 140.
In 100 days. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a lot of production.
It was amazing. I would never have been able to do it without using Scrivener.
Yeah.
So I love it, and I will never go back to my old way of writing.
So you've written the first 2. You've got 2 more in this series. How are you approaching this in terms of Scrivener? Are these all in one project? Is each book separate? Are you taking some of these orphaned scenes and characters from the first 2 and putting them in the 3rd and 4th novels?
Oh, yes. Well, so everything, all the series, I've got, I actually have 3 different series in the works at the moment on some ideas for some other things as well. I suppose it's the writer's compulsion. But it's all in one project. It's so much easier that way. I don't have to open multiple files and go back and forth with things. And the more books that you write, the more important it is to have it all in one place, in my opinion.
Well, especially if you're in a series, I've talked to some authors who write series, and having them all in the same project means that they can search back what's already published to find information about a character, a minor character, how did they describe it, or a setting, things like that.
Oh, absolutely. What did the grandfather say back in 1992? Was it 1992? Was it 1995? For me, another thing I have to keep track of, because I have quite a few characters, the main characters that, of course, we have clear ideas of what they look like and who they are. With some of the minor characters, as you get into a book series, you can't forget. So I use the character files as well. What I do is I go and I search for actors that I imagine that would look like the characters a bit. So I can just drag and drop a photograph in there. By the way, who would play the grandfather in my book? Bill Nighy.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea to look for actors, because if you've established that your character looks like this actor, you can then develop the character based on what you know of the actor. And it helps you make the character more real in your mind.
Oh, precisely. And there's no shortage of photos.
No, that's true. And images. You can watch a movie and see how they act, their gestures and how they walk, things like that.
Oh, yes. I used to use Aeon Timeline. I can't use it for my purposes anymore because they did an update, and now it doesn't print large format PDFs. But what I was so inspired by my visit to Shepperton Studios, where I got to see the War Room. They were filming Hobbs and Shaw at the time. And I walked in. Before this, it hadn't even occurred to me that one could work on a project this way. David and Kelly were so warm and welcoming, wonderful people, really talented. I walk into this room, and there's a conference table in the middle, and there are tables all around the outside. But on every square inch of the walls and on the tables, there are posters and photographs, magazine clippings, little dioramas of different scenes that they're shooting. It was like being struck by lightning. This is a new way to write. And so as soon as I returned home, I bought a design jet printer, 36-inch, huge thing with a scrolling roll of paper. And I got right into it, and I started putting together timelines of each of my books. And I ended up, I converted a room that had been storing, I think it was wine at the time, and I changed it into my own personal war room. And so I did all 3 series with Aeon Timeline. And it was unbelievable. And you can, of course, it works very well with Scrivener. And so my walls were covered with my new posters. And this helped too, because then anytime I was getting stuck or I needed to remember when something happened, I bring in my laptop because it's all synced to Scrivener. Even at the scene level, I can look at the timeline of everything as it progresses. Yeah, Aeon Timeline, if you're listening, please fix this. I've been writing them. I think they probably have blocked me by now because I write them an email once a year saying, please fix this for me. And I think by now they're tired of hearing from me.
Okay, so The Letters of the Dead is out now. The second book is The Prodigal Daughter. When is that going to be published?
I think it's August 2026 at the moment.
Okay. And the other 2, what, a year or 2 after for each one? Of course, you have to finish the other 2, but you seem to be quite productive, and I think you'll be finished by the end of the month, right?
Yes, 15 days at the most.
Okay.
Well, the book deal I have is only for the first 2 books, so I don't have a deal yet for book 3, but book 3 is finished. Well, it's in maybe second draft stage.
So assuming the first 2 sell well enough, then book 3 and 4 will be able to read.
Yes.
I like to ask my guests if they have a book that they'd like to recommend to our listeners, either one of your favorite books or something you've read recently. Do you have anything?
Oh, I do. The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern.
Right.
I love the settings. I love her characters. I fell in love with this book. It's gothic. It's a bit paranormal, but kind of like. It's less subtle than my books, but it's also set in Victorian England, which I love almost anything that's set in that time. And I think it's a bit long, maybe around 125,000 words. It's funny, when you start getting into book publishing, you start thinking in terms of how many words there are in every book.
Word count instead of page count, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You become familiar with what 50,000 words represents in pages. And,
yes.
Yeah. Okay, Isabella Valeri, thank you very much for talking with me.
Thank you so much, Kak.
If you enjoyed the podcast, please follow it in Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. To learn more about Scrivener, go to scrivenerapp.com. Join us next month for another conversation on Right Now with Scrivener.